Welcome to the Good Divorce Show, where we can help you learn how to navigate the journey of divorce with less conflict, less debt, and equip you not to just get divorced, but also learn how to be divorced. Your host, certified divorce coach Karen McNenny, shares her wealth of knowledge, gets advice from other relationship experts, and interviews couples who learn how to have a good divorce, so you can too. Now here's your host, Karen.
Thank you for joining me here on the Good Divorce Show. I am Karen McNenny, your Good Divorce Coach. And today, as we sit here in the month of June, it is Father's season and Father's Day. And I really believe that we need to give special focus to dads. We know that job descriptions change through divorce, that we sometimes do not have the same sort of resources available to men that we do with women. And so today, I'm really excited to bring dads right to the forefront as we chat with Patrick Duganz. For more than a decade, he has been the father engagement specialist at the Gallatin City County Health Department, which is located in Bozeman, Montana, down the road 200 miles from my front door here in Missoula. And Patrick helps children by helping their dads become happier, healthier, better fathers. And when he's not busy doing that work, he can be found dadding on his own while hiking or cross-country skiing with his son and his stepdaughter and his new partner, along with their doggo that looks a little like a Muppet. And occasionally, he even finds time to put up his feet and have a dad nap. Welcome to the show, Patrick Duganz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I would like to begin by just digging into this position that Gallatin County crafted, Father Engagement Specialist. What is it? And why did it have to be created?
So I'm a part of our home visiting team, which at the county health department is under our maternal child health program. And I guess a little over a decade ago, our head of maternal child health, Amy Gatterdam, they were looking at data and they saw that for every 15 moms, they would have a contact with a dad.
Wow, really imbalanced.
Very, very. And for actual dads who enrolled in home visiting, it was like 1 in every 50. So we're talking very, very few. And Amy's she's one of those people who she has an idea, an hour before you need it. Like just... And so she had seen that there were other places at the time. There was a few other communities in Montana that had fatherhood programs, and she pitched the state on putting it in a grant, and it got approved, and then sat, I think, for about 3 months with people applying, but didn't feel like those folks were the right fit. Which in a small community means I've met everybody who didn't get my job by now. So, but it really had this idea of let's find a dad to talk to other dads and see if we can get it to work. And when I started, coming up on 11 years ago, it was a 1-year contract. That was it.
Oh, wow.
It was 1 year. They guaranteed me nothing beyond that. And
well, you must have discovered something in that year, and they must have discovered something to be here 11 years later. What were the discoveries?
Well, I think that it comes down to that there really was a need. Gallatin County here in Montana, it's one of the faster growing places in the United States. And with that comes more families and more divorces. Yes. And so it really, they knew that there was this gap, that they weren't meeting with men. And that's a problem in a lot of, with a lot of different things. I mean, like, for instance, like a lot of dads don't know that they qualify for WIC because it's women, infant, children. They don't know that they would qualify if they're a single father. And so it was like that was kind of the idea, that there were these programs that are set up to help, and men weren't really getting to access them because it just, for a variety of reasons, a lot of stuff is branded toward moms, and
Mhm.
um, and there's really good reasons for that. I'm not saying there isn't. But there was the idea that maybe dads do need help, and I remember in my first month, uh, an attorney told me that I should already start looking for a job because nobody was going to sign up.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and 11 years later, that same attorney sends me about 6 referrals a year.
Oh
So
gosh. Yeah.
I don't remind him of that prediction.
Yes. Well, and even, you talk about your journey as a new dad
Yeah.
and fatherhood. And again, there's so much emphasis on the woman and the birth experience and nursing and all those early infant days. But here we have a dad who
Yep.
might sort of be bouncing around trying to find their place. What did that look like for you? And how do you now support dads in those early days and months?
So, looking back, I feel really let down on even a lot of the books about fatherhood, because they would, there rightly, there's a lot of talk about maternal, like mom and child bonding at that time.
Sure.
So for me, um, I saw myself as very much just like a support person, but I didn't even know what that looked like. My brother's almost a decade older than me, so like I didn't have like a sibling.
Sure.
Um, my kid was the fourth baby I'd ever held. Like,
Wow.
and they sent me home with them without questions.
And no user manual. Just
Yeah, it was
good
like,
luck.
hey, take it home. Like,
Here's your DNA. Figure it out.
and so, a lot of the emphasis had been like, well, like follow that lead of, uh, what mom and baby need. But that really didn't help me understand him. And I didn't really know how to do a lot of it. Even, like you can tell somebody, oh, this is how you change a diaper. And sure, but I needed more. I needed something as simple as, what do you do with a baby?
Yeah.
Like, because I know how to have fun with a kid. I have a lot of fun with an 11-year-old. With a 1-month-old, I was clueless.
In the dark. And
Yeah.
have you found, and whether it's causal or correlation, that because there's such maternal emphasis in those early months, which is just part of the biology,
Yeah.
and that role of dad becomes a little more as supporting actor, but then how that carries on through the divorce journey and how we look at the role of mother and father in the midst of divorce, and how that echo can play out in the role of fathers beyond the divorce.
I think it comes down to that we put a lot of pressure on women to, be this source of, uh first it's like your food and attachment.
Right.
You have this role. And then it becomes, right there, when we emphasize that, we're telling dad that he has a tertiary role to the family. And that's where we get that very archaic idea of, it's bills. Work, pay the bills. That's your job. You're this other helper.
You're the provider, and that's your
Yeah.
identity.
And the problem with that is, once the divorce happens, nobody's happy with that, right? The dads aren't happy, the moms aren't happy. And I know that we have a lot of people will say, oh, I want, after the divorce, after the breakup, I want the kids 100% of the time. And I get that, but no, you don't. You want to have like I love my kid, but sometimes I need to go to the store without him. I need to, I'm bald, but there was a time when I would have got a haircut. Um, and so you want to have that other person who can care for your kids. And if you've positioned it in this very archaic model of provider caregiver, well, I understand why the caregiver doesn't have a full trust of the provider, because they haven't been doing this role.
Right.
And
The job description changes actually for both parties when you become a single parent household.
yeah. suddenly you're responsible for all of these things that you weren't, or the way you're responsible for the things that you always took on. It's in a very different way, um I, like I always tell people, like, your first day as a single parent, if you're having a bad day, there's no one to tag out.
Yep.
Like,
You're just there. You're in the deep end.
exactly. And so I think for me, what I've really tried to emphasize is, yes, newborn baby is going to attach to mom a lot more. And there's real deep down DNA level reasons for that. But as that kid ages, we need to have already shown the dad what his role really is, not just in the day to day, make sure there are snacks next to the place where your partner breastfeeds, but more into, this is what you can also do.
Yeah.
This is how you can attach to a kid. It's not just being a helper, it's not just paying the rent, but you can. And I've had guys say, like, well, baby wakes up and wants to eat, so I don't get up. I'm like, babies don't just eat, they have to go back to bed.
Yeah.
Like, you get up, you bleary-eyed watch somebody breastfeed, then you can take the kid and put it to bed yourself.
Rocking, the singing, the soothing,
Exactly.
until finally they might go back to sleep.
Yeah. But I can understand how it's a very foreign thing for a lot of guys. Most men aren't like talked to about parenting, like, I mean, you can go to Target today and you'll find baby dolls that are, no matter how we rebrand, like, we've just spent the last 100 years acting like baby dolls are for, there's girls' toys and boys' toys.
That's right.
So, I'm 40 years old. Like, I was raised in that. Nobody ever said, hey, this is how you take care of a child. And, oh, you can play dad, although if somebody had come up with a, like, play dad kit, it would have been just me watching TV and then yelling, but it would have been a fun.
Maybe reflecting on your own dad,
Yeah.
your experience as a child, and the role of our fathers. I'm in my 50s, and my dad absolutely was the provider.
Yep.
And mom was home taking care of all the things on the home front.
Yeah. Like, I don't think my dad knew who my doctor was.
Right.
And that was fine. But now, now men are expected to be more involved. Even when they're in that parenting,
Yes. And we could maybe even stretch and say have more opportunity to be involved in the delight and the joy of raising a child more actively.
Yeah. And that means, though, that once there's that split, there's even more being asked.
Yes.
And so the more we can teach, like, the importance of, like, attachment, or finding ways to have joy in your kids without depending on your partner or co-parent to explain it to you.
Yeah. Do you find, again, what has been a traditional role in society? We have a narrative about dads as parental accessory. How that then ends up showing up in the court system, when we're looking at residential schedules, when we really are trying to identify what's in the best interest of the kids, and how lawyers and judges might look at that versus a specialist such as yourself.
The thing that I see happen a lot is kids are expensive. And yes. I have seen I've seen a lot of cases where, a full-time stay-at-home parent, a part-time stay-at-home parent expects that after the breakup, they'll continue to work the same amount of hours. And that means that the provider, the guy, and I've seen this flip the other direction too, but just we'll keep it in this way. It's, if you're expected, like here in Bozeman, Montana, for a 2-bedroom apartment, you're paying $1,900 to $2,600. a month. And if you're expected to pay for 2 of those, your hours aren't going to decrease. And then the question is like, oh, well, when are you going to parent? Right.
Right. There's just a very realistic conditions that
Yeah.
influence our capacity.
And that's where I've seen it, is the expectation of the amount of money needed to just survive in these high inflation days then leads to more hours worked and less time as a parent. And so I've seen the court kind of act like that's okay.
Right.
Like, it's okay if this guy continues, oh, well, this is what you were making it, 50 hours a week. What if you worked 60 hours? And it's, instead of saying, let's sit down and be a little realistic about what the world costs. But oftentimes those high conflict, it's like, people run into a place where it's no longer worthwhile to fight. And they get shoehorned in further into that working role, and they're miserable in it because they wanted to be in their kids' lives more, but they're not getting it. And so I've seen the court, I guess I would say, behave as that's okay.
Yeah, they perpetuate the norm of you're the provider and mom's going to have more time. And we know, you and I, as practitioners in this field, it's really important that children have access to both parents, that they have the opportunity to build relationship with both parents. Yeah. And there was not that long ago that dads were given Wednesday night dinner and every other weekend, and that was it. There was no discussion. And I know adult children now in their 40s and 50s who grew up in that world. Like, I was robbed. I was cheated in my childhood of spending time with my father.
And I think especially when parents then come back when kids are older and say, well, I wanted more, but I could only afford so much time with you, and how much, and this much with an attorney, and eventually this was the maximum that I could get.
Right.
And and I always like to pause and say, like, of course we're talking about willing, like, engaged dads. We're not talking about people who are not interested in that,
in parenting.
Yeah.
Right. Can we dive in specifically to the divorce world? And this, so often we think, well, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, and the battles of the marriage are going to just continue on post-divorce. You have some interesting thoughts about this and what a good divorce might sound like, and kind of where people start getting it wrong.
So one thing, and this is one thing I learned in going through my own divorce, which was, something in any long-term relationship is there are a handful of issues that keep coming back.
Sure. Same people.
Yeah. And they can be as simple as you left your shoes there again, and those are normal. And I don't think they're necessarily like unhealthy, but as those relationships become less and less fun, those issues become more numerous. And where I see people go wrong is that they see that initial packing of the bags and leaving as a move in that fight, right? In all those little conflicts. This is just another aspect of it. And what I realized in asking for my own divorce was, I am never going to fight with this person about anything that we have disagreed about over the last, I think at the time it was like 11 years of, it was like, I'm not going to do it. Like, those things that bother me about her, that about me that bother her, I'm never discussing or arguing about them again, because the end of that argument, no matter how big or small, was, yeah. And then we both decided to live somewhere else.
Yes. And that's the end of that. That's the end of that. The divorce is the solution.
Yeah. We're never going to, like, I'll put my shoes wherever I want. You spend whatever you want on, like, go over your budget. We're never going to argue about these things again. The only thing that we have in common now is that we have this kid and we
Mm-hmm.
made him and he's important to us. And that's where we will start now. And now I have a different relationship with you. And
That's right. The marriage ends,
yeah,
but our relationship gets renovated into this other thing where now we're cooperating as co-parents.
Yeah.
And that idea that there has to be a winner and a loser. And I think we're in agreement. It's the family court system and how we do divorce that it ends up just becoming a weapon
yeah.
between two people who have to carry on. And it's not a weapon, it's a tool. And it's a tool that we can use to improve that parent relationship and improve the environment that the kids are going to grow up in.
And I always tell this story. I had a dad where every time they exchanged, they were getting into these arguments in front of their kids, just arguing. I said, why? And he said, well, she'll say this, and then I respond. And I said, yeah, but why? Why are you engaging? I was like, if somebody was rude to you walking down the street, are you going to stop and have a 10-minute discussion? Or are you going to be like, nope, I guess I ran into a jerk today, and move on with your life? And he goes, well, I would ignore just a random person. But I said, then you could ignore this. This isn't a time. And you can just say, can you put that in an email?
Not right here at the
yeah.
school, in the parking lot, on our
Yeah.
front porch, particularly when we're in transition with our children.
And he said, okay, well, I'll try that. And he texted me and he goes, that did not go well. And I said,
put it in an email.
And I said, I didn't expect it to go well, but you just set a boundary. And that's hard to do because you've never set a boundary like that with this person. And that goes for men and women both. The boundaries we have in a romantic relationship are very, very different. Like you would never say to your romantic partner, please stop talking and email me about this conflict. But it's okay to say that to your kid's dad or mom. Like, hey, let's not do this right now. We can.
Yes, in a respectful, compassionate way.
Yeah,
and actually you're trying to preserve something in that relationship, not make it worse, because if you stay engaged and it escalates and then the child's exposed and then everyone leaves hot and bothered and in a big mess. But
exactly. And
that boundary is preserving something for the future relationship.
And I remember that dad, he said that's the only thing I now say if it starts is just like, hey, just send me an email about it. And he goes, and then when I get the email, I don't read it. I was like, okay. He's like, I give it like an hour.
Yeah.
And then I read it.
Yeah.
And if it's upsetting, I give it another hour.
Awesome.
And I'm like, that's exactly what this is. It's not a business relationship, but it is a less labor intensive relationship now. And if it's still the same amount of effort, then you're still engaging in the old relationship.
Right. Yep.
And it's okay to just say, I can sit on this. This isn't an emergency.
Allowing that limbic system of the brain that gets triggered and hijacked, and then we want to respond in kind. You said, just keeps us engaged in an old story that we very purposely left. We spent a lot of time, money, resources, heartache, couples counseling to finally say, here's our solution. And I remember my own divorce moment and us basically in our couples counseling with our couples therapist, like, we think our work here is done. And one of her words of advice was, your goal is to become indifferent towards each other.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me to wrap my head around, because I'm like, how am I not going to have feelings for this person? But I now realize it means I'm not reactive. I'm not triggered. It's like the stranger on the street.
Yeah.
That's indifference.
Yeah. And, obviously there's times that, there's going to be care and concern in different ways.
Sure.
But it can't be that 24/7 anymore. And it's really hard, especially when you have people who really do like conflict. And I think some relationships toward the end just become so much conflict that's now how you relate.
Yes. And anger is a way to still keep someone engaged. It's not quite fully grieving, fully that, that rupture of the relationship, the uncoupling, the moving beyond and before, any kind of interaction that even is escalated is still deeply in relationship with that person.
I'm glad you used that word grief. My partner often says that it's the part of divorce that is the hardest to understand, because we spend so much of our life trying not to engage in grief. Like even the way we structure funerals is often like ignoring the grief.
Yeah.
And she goes, that's it for, when I met her romantically, she was like, where are you in grieving? Because like the divorce was about a month from being finalized. And I was like, it was the first time somebody had said those words to me. Where are you in grieving? And I was like, I'm like, I don't know. Like
Am I grieving?
Yeah. And that's what I think though, is that people don't like that feeling. Grief's awful. It feels really energy intensive. It feels gross. But if you don't grieve, then you don't get to change. You don't get to reevaluate things. You're staying in it. You're just no longer getting the benefits of a romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm. And there's like an alchemical process, I think, when we move through grief. And if our spouses had died, we and our surrounding community would have a better idea of how to manage that. Even though we're still not great with death, we would at least recognize, oh, that person's grieving. But in divorce, we don't often recognize the marriage died, the identity died, their time with their children. There's a micro death there. Like there is so much grief and death that is happening through the divorce process.
Well, like I used to, I was husband, father. And then one day I'm just dad.
And only part-time.
Yeah. And it was like,
and no longer partner husband.
Yeah. Then what am I supposed to do the other 50%?
And it takes a while for us to recalibrate and reset that compass.
Yeah. But that is the grieving process, is figuring out who you are now after is so important. And, and that's where I start, to kind of round it out. That's where I start with my clients. You stopped the art. You ended that. The divorce is the end of every conflict you had. Every conflict you have now, even if it echoes the old, it's in a brand new context. Because again, like you can just not read that email right now.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it sounds like your new partner is a very smart lady.
Yeah,
asking the right questions.
She is. She's much smarter than me. It's embarrassing.
When we come back from the break, we're going to continue our conversation with Patrick Duganz, who is the father engagement specialist in Bozeman, Montana, working at the Gallatin City County Health. And we're going to dive into a few case studies, some real life stories from the Dad Chronicles. So stay with us.
Are you thinking about getting divorced? Before you call a lawyer, call the Good Divorce Coach, Karen McNenny, a certified divorce counselor, co-parenting specialist, and mediator. Karen's signature Good Divorce experience will guide you through your divorce journey, from the day you make that difficult decision to the day the decree is signed, all for a predictable fee. The Good Divorce Coach will teach you and your partner how to get divorced and be divorced with less conflict and less debt. Visit thegooddivorcecoach.com to get in touch with Karen.
Now, back to the show with Karen.
Welcome back to the Good Divorce Show. Thanks for staying here in the conversation today, particularly you dads out there in the world where you might feel that you're on an island, a forgotten island, in not only the story of parenthood, but also the story of divorce, which is why I'm so delighted today to be talking with Patrick Duganz. He is the father engagement specialist at the Gallatin City County Health Department in Bozeman. He is a dad. He is a stepdad. He is a divorced father. Welcome back to the show, Patrick, and to all of our listeners. Thanks for hanging in there. So can we go down the path of your divorce journey? And I always say we don't need to hear what brought you to divorce and the private, precious story of your marriage, but you were already doing this work with fathers.
Yep.
And then started to move through your own divorce process. And I'm curious how that informed the lens that you look through, and specifically how you started to support dads through that lens and how it might have looked differently.
It's odd. The positive feelings, because I always say, when I asked for a divorce, I did feel pretty positive.
And some relief
Yeah,
along with that. It's always a relief grief cocktail. It's kind of
yeah,
how it comes out.
but it was about 2 days later, I was like, I was very sad because I wondered if my clients would, I don't know, lose respect for me or something. It was this strange thing of like, I remember one time I had a client say, like, I I wish I could have a life put together like yours, you know. I
Oh,
just want to be married and have my kids. And I thought, like, that guy would he now look at me as a loser? Like, I just felt like there's something. And I remember then I was talking to a dad who was going through a divorce, and he just said, he's like, I mean, do you know anything about that? And I said, brother, I'm going through a divorce too. And there was like a pause, and he said, he goes, good. I was really afraid you didn't know what this felt like.
yeah. It actually brought you a new level of understanding.
Yeah. And what's been so strange is the dads who are married but are wanting to learn different, ways to be a father, and the dads going through a divorce, none of them lost any respect because they just look at me as another dad to talk to. But
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And I remember just being really worried. Like, oh, and now almost to a person, if they're going through a divorce or a custody battle, they're like, man, what did you do? And it's not a place for us to be, like, women, courts. Like, it's just, it's very, it's much deeper than I can describe. It, and I've seen so many guys, I think I could describe as being able to express their emotions differently because they're like, they can say something and they know it's okay. Like, I've had that thought, I've had that feeling, I've had that grief,
Yep.
and
That anger,
yeah,
that resentment, the bitterness, like
yeah,
all the feelings.
and the joy, like all of it. Like, it's so weird. Divorce has this amazing tableau of emotions that it's
Yes.
like, I've always said, it's the closest to a psychotic episode I can imagine. You know, I'm
And
I'm
it's
happy, I'm
yeah,
sad, I'm angry, I'm nothing. What am I doing?
all over.
And so I like now that I can talk to guys and I can say, when they're like, what did you do? And I said, like, you know, um, my ex-wife was a paralegal and I work with the courts. So we realized that we had a conflict in almost every court with
Oh,
so many attorneys locally that we sat down and we hashed it out. We had a kitchen table divorce and then went and talked to attorneys that we knew. And they're like, well, how did you do that? I'm like, like, it, for us, it was okay. One of us is getting mad. Let's call it. We could come
yep.
back to this,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and I'd like to think that it's helped some of them also realize, like, I don't want to go spend 15,000 on an attorney.
You don't have to.
No.
I think we all have been drinking the Kool-Aid that there's one way to get divorced, and it's to lawyer up
Yeah.
and become adversaries and make it a battle, and that there will be a winner and a loser. And that is what we're trying to stop here in the good divorce movement. There are other options. You can have a good divorce.
Yeah. Well, because there are things that are going to make you feel like you won, and there are things that are going to make you feel like you lost. And that's like, that's life. Like, just, and so I think a lot of dads have been happier that I'm divorced than when I was married, which is really weird.
Like, oh, you're grounded. There's no longer this, like, Patrick's on the pedestal of perfection. Like, oh, he's been through it. That's real. I feel that as a practitioner as well. And I think it's true. I can relate in a different way. And, and we've now taken our kids from kindergarten to college. So we've been through every stage of the game. And I'm here to tell you, we just graduated our son a week ago, and there is this crazy divorce echo that's happening because now everybody's gone all over again.
Yeah.
And I feel this absence. And even, my husband, who we've had contact virtually every week in some way for the last 15 years. And now that is also shifting. So his presence. So there's a long shadow that comes with divorce.
Yeah. I always tell people that, you want to have at least a pleasant relationship with your co-parent, or, indifferent at the very minimum, because this person is in your life. And I've had dads say like, no, once the kids are done with school, then I'm like, no, because they're going to have kids, or they're going to graduate, or they're going to move, and they're going to get married, and
there's
she'll
grandbabies.
be there for all of it.
It is a forever relationship. So why would we spend thousands of dollars and time and effort to just make it all worse for the future? This is such a disservice to families.
Why would I have a bitter conflict with someone I'm going to know for 30 more years?
That's right. That's right. Let's dive in a little bit to, I'm glad we're in full agreement about this, Patrick, helping families have better divorces.
Yeah.
And this idea of that person that you're going to be, this forever relationship. It doesn't end at 18. It doesn't end when the court, checks off you're no longer guided by your parenting plan or beholden to it. It is a forever relationship in some degree.
Mm-hmm.
You have this interesting paradigm of remembering that your relationship with your spouse is totally different than the relationship with the child. And you want to be the special, important, valued parent to your child. Well, that's happening on the other side of the fence as well. And this idea of thinking about going into the child's experience and how important, just how valuable and special and loved that other parent is, just like you want to be.
Yeah, it's something I always come back to. And it's one of the reasons I talk so much about like approaching conflict in a new way and in a more calm way, because if I think about my ex-wife as my ex-wife, now she's this person, there was a conflict, I don't get to live in this house anymore, there's all that. But if I think, hey, that's my son's mom, well, how do I want my son to talk to his mom? How do I want my son to feel and think about this person? And I want that relationship to benefit him. I don't want him to, be 35 years old in therapy being like, my parents poisoned the well with each other constantly.
Terrible. Terrible.
Yeah. I want him to be like, what he says, which is, he's like, like, you guys don't argue. It's like, no, why would we?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want him involved in those conflicts. And I want him to come away with the feeling like, my dad is nice to my mom. My mom is nice to my dad.
And that makes it so much easier for the kiddo.
Yeah.
And again, what do we gain in continuing the war? Again, the divorce is the end point of that.
Yeah.
Now we get to reconstruct and renovate our family and our relationship.
And I think about it like this, like if my son came to me and said, I don't know, so-and-so is my favorite celebrity, would I be like, I hate that guy's movies? Or would I be like, oh, what do you like about him? Yes. Like, I would be inquisitive. I would be kind, because I don't want to just...
You don't want to crush your kids' joy.
So...
And that is exactly right. And I think when kids come home and they're like, we went fishing, we had such a great time, or, oh, mom took us to such and such, that I love this celebrity idea of like, I can be happy for them and the relationship they have with their other parent. I don't have to feel the same way. I'm not in that relationship.
And like,
but boy, we want children to have great relationships with their parents.
Yeah. And also him having positive experiences with her. Like he hasn't, but like, let's say he goes to Disneyland with his mom and he's like, what a magical place. Part of me is going to be like, damn it, I wanted to take you to Disneyland.
Yeah.
But also he went to Disneyland. I need to just focus on, did you see a Jedi? Was that fun? Awesome.
Yeah. And really changing this lens of abundance, whereas I think we start with a scarcity mindset when it comes to divorce.
Yeah.
And that gets us in trouble.
Yeah. What am I losing?
Yep.
And it's like, well, you're losing a lot of conflict and
Right.
unhappiness, or you can focus on all of these material things that don't mean anything. And
the bonus.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to dig a little deeper into your world, Patrick, because you did bring to your son a bonus adult in your partner.
I did.
And you got a bonus daughter, which is how I like to see these things of like families can grow and ebb, and new people who are just bringing love. Why? Right? Their teacher, new person in their life, just wants good for the child. Coach, new person in their life. Your new partner, new person who just wants to bring love. So what advice, or maybe more so the story of how this unfolded and the things that you did in order to make it a successful blending of bonus people for your son and you?
So I would say this is, we emotionally, that relationship with my partner Jennifer and I, it was very easy and very quick and almost natural for us to fall in love. It was just it was very, very simple process. But
congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah, we will be together 5 years soon. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But we didn't bring the kids into that relationship for a few years.
Wow.
And that really came from a place of, we wanted to be mindful of the kids. Now, she had been divorced for multiple years. But we had this idea that let's wait until the kids are more interested, bit by bit. Like, both of us could afford to live separately. We each had our place, and our parenting plans lined up for us to have a weekend together. You said earlier about the Wednesday night dinner and the every other weekend, and I'm like, well, that was my relationship with my partner for a few years.
Yeah.
But at one point, both of the kids were asking more, like, well, where, like, oh, well, who is this person?
So they knew you were dating, and then they knew you had someone special in your life, and you could, gently refer to that person. But when they got to an age and an interest, you followed their lead.
Yeah.
And you were able to build a relationship outside of your children being in the front seat.
Yeah.
Because I hear a lot, like, it's not convenient, it's not cost effective. Well, our schedules don't lie. Well, we have to involve the kid. I'm like, if anyone's going to be inconvenienced, it should be you, grown-ups.
Yeah.
Not the children.
Yeah, that's how I think we both looked at it, as like during the pandemic, which is when my divorce happened. 12 days into the pandemic, we separated. Yeah. It was like, stay in this house, deadly lung virus. I don't know, lung virus sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So when we got together, I was still like, I was seeing my son almost every day because I was doing a lot of work from home. And so I was there during the day. And that led to a lot of processing of the divorce. He and I, I always say, we were on a hike one day and he was being kind of backtalky and stuff. And I said, what is going on? And he said, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, the heck? Okay, well, tell me. And he's like, no, you don't want to hear it. And I was like, now I can't wait to hear it. And he looks at me, he goes, I'm so pissed at both of you. And it's a 6-year-old boy telling me he's not mad. He's pissed.
Pissed at his parents.
And that moment really meant a lot to me, for I don't want to bring someone into his life and then have him like this person, have him care about this person, and then be like, guess what? Dad did it to you twice. Like,
yep.
I wanted to have more security. And, that was something my girlfriend and I agreed on, that these kids, they've already seen a divorce. Like they
Mhm.
don't need they like if this is going to work, we want to know that it's already healthy, it's already solid. And then when the kids, I remember we went on a camping trip and they were interested in the adults for about 2 seconds. And then they just wanted to learn about each other. Like, who's this person? Like, yeah, okay, the bald guy's, boring, mom. Let's look at his I'll talk to his kid about Pokemon. And doing stuff like that it took a lot of the pressure off, so that when about a year ago we were like, hey, we'd like to move in together. Neither of the
Which is about
kids.
4 years into your relationship,
Yeah.
3, 4 years into your
Yeah.
relationship. Now we feel like we've got solid ground, kids integrated, their
Yep.
relationships building. We can see how this could be successful, which again is part of why we delay, is we want it to be solid and successful. And if you go too fast,
Yeah.
kids reject new partners, siblings get
Well, and
like you just can run into all sorts of trouble.
well, and that was the whole thing. I didn't want to have one of those relationships where I'm the referee between my partner and my kid. Like doesn't sound fun to me. Didn't seem interesting. And when we said to the kids, "Hey, we're thinking of moving in together," neither of them cared. I mean, it was like we were telling them like we're having meatloaf for dinner. Like they're just like, "Sure." Like when, where, and then they saw the place and they were like, "Okay, great. Which room is mine?"
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
but it was, and I'm not saying that taking that long is for everybody,
Right.
but my kid was also like, his mom got remarried like in there somewhere. um my stepdaughter's dad got remarried at one point. Like it was just like there's a lot going
Mhm.
on. And
Mhm.
you know I like what you said. If somebody's going to be inconvenienced, it can be us.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and I like that we had become such a fixture in each other's lives that by the time we moved in, there was already a dynamic and trust.
Well,
Thank
congratulations
you.
on successful blending. Hope that long
We'll
continues.
see. My kid's going to be a
Yeah.
teenager soon, and we'll have two of them, and I'm
Well,
sure it'll feel less successful.
and that's, the other part, like we're in the raising of our kids actively for 18 years, really for 25. And then we have a whole lifetime beyond that
Yeah.
in which to build and enjoy and really luxuriate in our new relationships. I want to circle back to a client that you had mentioned to me previously who had been dealing with a struggle of custody with their child, finally received their child back in custody, had a big panic. Can you just set the scene for us and help us to understand this dad's journey and what was so remarkable about that over the last 5 years?
So this guy, he was in a relationship.
Can we just give him a name? Can we just call him Bob
Yeah,
for
Bob.
the storytelling purpose? Okay.
So Bob was in a relationship, and Bob's partner had some substance abuse issues, and those are, quite common enough in Montana. But hers had
Yeah.
an added part where she would get violent with people. So during one of these incidents, uh, his newborn son was removed. So Bob's kid goes to foster care for a few months. And then one, about, I guess it would be about 80 days separated. Uh, there's a holiday weekend, and the state of Montana decides that this is the perfect time to bring the kid to dad. And a lot of times the state will be slow. They'll be like, oh, let's do some visitations, let's do an overnight, and then we'll do a return. Not here. It went from 0 to 100. So it's Tuesday morning, 8 a.m., and my phone rings. And it's this dad, it's Bob. And he says, you need to call the worker at the state and they need to come get him. I can't do this, and you have to give him back.
And how old was the child?
He
then?
would now be coming up on about 5 months old. So
Okay. So
I
big shift.
and so I said, "Are you home?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, I'm coming over." And I just cancel my day because I really like this guy. He's just kind of a I don't know. He was kind of a little bit like um I can't describe, like, just had this way of being very quiet. I was like, I want him to have this kid. Because when he would talk about the kid, he'd be like, I want my son back. I want my son back. And now he's got his kid back and he's panicking, which made sense to me. Of course he would panic. If somebody hands you a baby you weren't expecting, you'll panic.
Just like where we started this conversation in your own fatherhood.
Yeah.
Dads are not always set up to succeed in those early months.
So I showed up, kid is screaming. He's like, I don't know. Like, I changed his diaper and he's shaking. He hasn't slept in, like more than an hour for days. And I said, he's like, I think he's hungry. I think he's hungry. And I'm like, when did you feed him? He's like, I don't know. What time is it? I'm like, it's 8:30. He's like, an hour ago. I'm like, he's not hungry. And he's like, well, then what's wrong with him? And I was like,
he could just tell us.
Yeah, I was just like, just hand him to me and go sit down. And do the whole 5 S's, the swaddle, side, shush, side, do those. And kid goes out.
No, wait, I don't want you to blow past those, Patrick, because we're learning here. Give us the 5 S's. Right? Dads and moms are listening.
I always get them in the wrong order, so that's why I always try to blow past them. But it's it's the 5 S's to comforting an infant, which is suck, swaddle, side, shush, and they used to say shake. Now I think they use a different word, but you're not shaking angrily. You're just it's a vibrate,
kind of a bounce.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
And not every infant and not every situation, but if you can set that up, most kids will calm. Up to somewhere between 6 and 8 months, it starts to wear off. So I do that. Kid goes to sleep, and Bob doesn't even react. He's just bloodshot and gazing into the distance. And he goes, "You were here for 10 minutes and he's asleep. I've had him all weekend and I couldn't do that." And I was like, "Well, of course, idiot." And I said that, and he looked at me. I'm like, you didn't know what you didn't know what to do. You could have called me on Saturday. I would have walked you through it. And he's like, "Well, what did you do?" And I said, "Okay, we're going to learn it all today. We're going to learn what I would spend 6 months teaching you. We're just going to do it." And he's like, "I'm really tired." And I'm like, "That's just how life is now."
That's parenting.
Yeah. You just don't worry. You'll sleep in a year. You'll love it. And we focused on everything that day: bottle temperature, how to set up the crib, just very basic things. And I left at like 4:00, and he's like, "What if I can't do it tonight?" And I said, "Then you call me and I'll call you an idiot again, because you can do this. And I really do believe in you. Just try one more day and I will call you in the morning." And so I call him the next day, and he's like, he only got up once. Aww. And I said, that's good.
That's a win.
And I checked in on him every day, spent time with him every day that week. And when his kid was about a year old, I was there the day before his family was coming in, and they were gonna have a birthday party. And he's like, "Look at him. Isn't he so cool?" And I said, "He is." And he goes, "I was gonna give him up."
Yeah.
And I said, "You weren't. You just didn't know what to do, but you didn't want to. Because if you wanted to, you wouldn't have called me. You would have called CPS." I said, "You called me instead." And he's I've helped a lot of dads, and I've spent a lot of time on parenting, but I always think of that's what most of us need. We need to be able to call somebody when we're about to lose it. And
that's whether you're a mother or a
yeah,
father. Like, this is not you. We are focusing on you dads because you do come underskilled.
yeah,
From the get-go. You are conditioned to be an underskilled parent to infants, and it does start with baby dolls.
yeah,
And we all need to learn. And as a mother of two, I had my really lonely days of like, why am I suffering? Why am I the only one who does not know how to soothe? I had a colicky child.
Oh
I'm
my
like, I'm
Lord.
going to shove this kid back in.
Yeah,
I cannot do this.
yeah. And I think about that. I think about him probably. I mean, I still talk to him, but I think about him probably weekly, even though I don't talk to him weekly anymore. Because I think if that's what people need, then I'm lucky enough to sometimes be that phone call, and it means a lot to me, as a dad, because that's what I needed. That's what I needed when I brought a baby home and I didn't know what to do. I needed to be able to tell somebody, I don't know what I'm doing.
Without being shamed,
Yeah.
without being afraid of the courts, without the isolation of it, like to really support
Yeah.
our parents and our families navigating divorce. In addition to that, like, we need to be taught how to do it better.
And he's a great dad. He manages a business, a home, and everything his kid needs. And I remember when I was going through my divorce, and I told him this, I was like, I thought of him all the time, because if he can do it, it's not like I'm better than him, but it's like, if he can face this, I'm gonna be okay too. And that's the essence of what support is that when we're able to give support, we're also receiving it,
Mhm.
and that's
So beautiful.
um
Well, and
yeah,
that's why the Good Divorce Show exists,
yeah,
so that we can share these stories and inspiration and encouragement and tips and learn. And it's just been such a delight. I think Patrick is probably going to have a second appearance because there are more stories in there. We've been chatting today with Patrick Duganz, father engagement specialist in Bozeman for Gallatin City County Health Department. And I really want to shout out a government agency who has embedded this into their support services for families. It's really beautiful. Is there anything you would like to say to those dads and moms that are out there listening today, as we wrap up our conversation, Patrick?
oh man, I guess all I would say is parenting is very hard, very wonderful, and it's a privilege to get to take part in it.
Beautiful. And if people are local in Gallatin Valley here in Montana, where can they find you
They can
and learn from you?
go to our website, to healthygallatin.org, and under family services, it'll say For Dads, and that's me.
Yay, for dads.
Yep.
And it just so happens that Patrick and I are chatting the day after Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all of you dads out there. And remembering that what's most important, in the words of Patrick, is that they see us happy, that they know happiness and joy are part of life. And we have to take agency in order to find that and create that. And when we stay stuck in unhealthy relationships, when we are creating more conflict, then we are just telling our kids, get ready for adult life because it's going to be dark and dismal. We don't want to share those stories. So thank you, Patrick, for your time today and your well wishes and your continued work.
Thank you.
And to all of you listening, celebrating you for taking the time to care enough about your children, your future, and their future to continue to examine, how can I create and find my way to my own good divorce? And remember, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Thanks for listening. Do you have questions or thoughts about this week's episode? Let us know by following the Good Divorce Coach on Facebook and Instagram at Good Divorce Coach, and leave a comment. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific or listen anytime wherever you get your podcasts.